Hi class. So the reading that we're going to be going over is called Rhetorical Reading Strategies and the Construction of Meaning. This is from your textbook, Writing About Writing. Haas and Flower are the authors. All right, so a little bit of background about this study. It came out of the field's focus of the process of writers in the late 80s, early 90s. We began to see in the field of composition studies that we don't know what goes on in students' mind when they sit down to write. This study looked at what are experienced readers doing different than less experienced ones, and what is actually going on in these two groups of students' mind as they sit down to read and make use of difficult texts. And so when the book talks about experienced readers, they're talking about essentially grad students who've been in college 5 to 10 years, and incoming freshmen who are essentially bringing with them the skill set that they learned in secondary. So a little bit background information on what reading is, how they frame the process of reading. They say reading is a constructive rather than receptive process, meaning does not exist in a text, but in readers and the representations that they build. Readers construct meaning through a dialogue with the original text, other readers, and rhetorical context of the text. So essentially, that idea goes against what a lot of secondaries teach when it comes to, here's this literary text, this is the right answer for it, what does this symbolize? We're trying to figure out what the author intended each of these things to represent and mean, rather than students entering into these texts, making up their own individual meanings based off of their own learning and experiences. So very against the grain of what a lot of incoming freshmen are dealing with when they think, what does it mean to sit down to make sense of a text? And that's why we're spending time going over this now. And this information that we're going to go over is not just useful when it comes to how do I make sense of the difficult texts you're going to encounter in this class, but as well as all of your classes here at Laverne. So right here to the right is a visual representation of what the articles that you're reading this semester should look like after you've integrated and entered this sort of dialogue with the author. It doesn't necessarily have to be inside the textbook. I sometimes know students are still hesitant to write in the textbooks. Strongly encourage you to, but this can also, take place on a separate note sheet. But a lot of underlining, a lot of writing in the margin, making sense of what it is the author's saying. By this, I think he's getting at this point. Right here, this is the main idea. I wonder what he means by this. And so getting your own text ready for when we have the larger class discussions, which will essentially be a video like this that you'll watch and pause at certain points to contribute your own information and respond to your classmates. So one of the next thing I want to get into is, what does it mean to be a good reader? So many students enter college are good readers in the traditional sense. They have large vocabularies, they're quick readers, they do well with comprehension, they can identify introductions, conclusions, generalization, and supporting details. However, it doesn't go beyond that. They fail to analyze and criticize text because they don't move past paraphrasing and summarizing. And we're going to get into this a little bit more later, but there's definitely nothing wrong with paraphrasing or summarizing. That's just as far as a lot of students entering to college get. They operate under this mindset of, if I understand all of the words and can paraphrase the content, then I have successfully read it. I'm done with the reading assignment, essentially. Which is simply not the case when you get to academic texts from scholarly articles, which are going to primarily make up what we're going to be reading in this class. So in the two groups of students that the theorists looked at the graduate students and the incoming freshmen, they found 3 major strategies that students use to make use of text. All 3 of these strategies are ones that I would like you to apply as you read our articles in this class. The first 2 were shared. We see the incoming freshmen as well as graduate students making use of it. The third one, which is what our focus will be on, rhetorical reading strategies, was absent with the incoming students. So content strategies. These essentially are concerned with content or topic information. What is the text about? The main goal is to extract information from the text. As the reader reads, they may be questioning, interpreting, or summarizing, paraphrasing what the text is about or what the text is saying. So some examples of content strategy annotations are students writing, I think that it's about social conditions like families in which both parents work and changing roles of women. So we're talking about psychological principles here. I don't know what glibness is, so this is still confusing. And again, this is something that both experienced and freshman students applied this strategy, and nothing's wrong with it. The basic step in understanding difficult texts is being able to apply content strategies and be able to figure out what is the text literally saying, what is it trying to communicate. The problem comes when students don't move past what the text is saying. The next strategy looks at function feature, which refers to conventional generic functions of text or conventional features of discourse, naming parts of the text, pointing to specific words, sentences, or section of the text. Examples, this is the main point, or this part seems to be explaining. Function feature strategies focus on what the text is doing. So this is very important when it comes to where to speed up and slow down when reading academic journal articles. You'll notice you don't read it as you would a novel, where it's like it takes you about a couple minutes to read each page. You'll speed up, slow down, especially when you get to the discussion section, conclusion, introduction, findings. You're going to be reading over that several times, spending a lot of time in those sections. But then when it talks kind of about statistics or data analysis, methods, that's important information, but not so much for our class. So rhetorical reading strategies, this is what the students who essentially have been working with academic texts in college for 5 to 10 years, the strategies that they use to make use of difficult texts. So they take the text beyond itself. They're concerned with constructing a rhetorical situation for the text, trying to account for author's purpose, context, and effect on the audience. Those 3 things are main. When you're doing rhetorical reading strategies, you're looking what's the author's purpose in saying this, what context does this exist in a larger conversation, and what effect does this have on me as the reader, and is that effect intended, or kind of what's going on rhetorically with the text. With this strategy, readers use cues in the text as well as their own knowledge to recreate or infer the rhetorical situations of the text that they are reading. Some examples. So the author is trying to make the argument that you need scientific specialists in psychology. I wonder if the author intended this section to be confusing. I don't think this would work for blank context. So to kind of summarize the main goal of rhetorical reading strategies, it is to help students move beyond this simple information exchange view to a more complex rhetorical reading model where they account for the author's purpose, context, and effect on the audience and use cues in the text as well as their own knowledge to infer the rhetorical situation of the text they are reading. So I want to focus in on that last portion of this where it says they use their own knowledge to infer the rhetorical situation of the text that they are reading. So that's one of the main things I want you to take from this. In addition to step 1 is understanding the material, what it's literally trying to communicate, but you're not done there. You need to look at the fuller context, the audience, the purpose, the author's intent, the rhetorical nature of the piece, essentially. I want you to think of yourself as a knowledgeable individual who's entering into this text with the intent of creating meaning, having a sort of dialogue with the author who wrote this, first individually as you read this, writing in the margins, making sense using, do you know these arguments to be true? Do you agree with this to an extent? Nothing that we assign this class is truth, capital T, something that I am trying to pass down to you guys that I don't want you to question. While all the sources that we read are definitely credible, you know, and have gone through all the hoops to get published in academic journals, the point of us reading this stuff is for you to engage critically and analyze this material. So the last thing that you need to do to complete this video portion is write a brief response, about 5 to 6, if more, that's fine, but at least 5 well thought out sentences reflecting on this statement. So examine the ways that the reading strategies explored in this study are similar as well as different than what you've previously learned. How is this similar or different than how you make sense of difficult text now? So thinking about whatever educational context you've come from, what have they taught you about reading, about making meaning of text, what it means to be a good reader? What did we talk about in this PowerPoint? What are the areas of intersection? What's similar? What overlaps? What have you like, I've never even heard of that or thought of that in this way before? What do you currently do when you sit down with a text that's very difficult? Which of these 3 strategies, if any, do you apply? What does this look like for you? Include real examples. All right.